What happens when a seasoned talk show host tries to conduct a thoughtful interview only to have his guest turn a simple conversation into complete chaos? When Jasmine Crockett walked onto the set of Bill Maher's show that November evening, she had no idea, or perhaps she knew exactly, that she was about to deliver one of the most spectacular self-destructions in television history. This wasn't going to be a memorable interview because of brilliant insights or compelling debate. This was going to be remembered as the night a guest completely unraveled on live television, burning every bridge, destroying her own reputation, and proving that sometimes the most devastating opponent you can face is yourself. What you're about to witness is 38 seconds that spiraled into 30 minutes of chaos. The moment a promising political voice became a cautionary tale and a masterclass in how not to handle disagreement. When the cameras are rolling and millions are watching, the lights blaze bright inside the studio on the CBS lot. That familiar entertainment industry glow that transforms ordinary spaces into television magic. Bill Maher's show had been running for years, a fixture in late-night programming where political commentary mixed with celebrity interviews and debates that occasionally generated heat, but usually stayed within the bounds of civil discourse. The show's format was well established. Bill would sit behind his desk, guests would occupy the chairs across from him, and conversations would flow with the practiced rhythm of someone who'd done this thousands of times. The studio audience filed in with the buzzing anticipation that comes from being part of live television. They'd come expecting thoughtful discussion, maybe some controversial opinions delivered with Bill's signature wit, perhaps a few laughs. They had no idea they were about to witness something completely unprecedented. Bill sat in his makeup chair backstage, reviewing his notes with practiced efficiency. At 70, he'd seen everything television could throw at him. Hostile guests, technical disasters, topics that exploded into argument. He knew how to handle difficult conversations, how to redirect when things got heated, how to maintain control of his show, even when guests brought their own agendas. Jasmine Crockett just arrived, his producer said, appearing at the dressing room door. She's in hair and makeup now. Great, Bill replied, glancing at his notes about her. A rising political figure, outspoken on social issues, someone generating buzz in certain circles, should be an interesting conversation. Just be careful, the producer cautioned. She's been pretty aggressive on social media lately. Very confrontational. Bill waved off the concern with the confidence of someone who'd navigated countless difficult interviews. They're always more reasonable in person than they are on Twitter. Once they're face-to-face sitting in the chair, the human element kicks in. We'll be fine. But Bill Maher had no idea what was about to happen, because Jasmine Crockett hadn't come to his show to have a conversation. She'd come to make a scene. In the green room, Jasmine sat rigid in the makeup chair, her jaw tight, her energy already crackling with aggression. The makeup artist worked nervously, sensing the tension radiating from this guest, the barely contained hostility that seemed to fill the small room. "You doing okay?" the artist asked gently, trying to ease the atmosphere. "I'm fine," Jasmine snapped. "Just get this done. I have things to say tonight." The artist exchanged a worried glance with the production assistant standing nearby. This wasn't the energy of someone nervous about their first major television appearance. This was something else. Something angry, confrontational, loaded for war. 5 minutes, Miss Crockett, the stage manager called out. Jasmine stood abruptly, shaking off the makeup bib, checking her appearance in the mirror with quick, aggressive movements. Whatever was about to happen, she was ready for it. More than ready, she was eager. The show's opening proceeded normally. Bill delivered his monologue with practiced timing, landing jokes about the week's political news, warming up the audience, getting them in the right mood for the conversations to come. The cameras captured his familiar presence, relaxed, confident, in complete control of his domain. "My first guest tonight is a political figure who's been making waves with her outspoken commentary on various issues," Bill said, transitioning smoothly into the interview segment. "Please welcome Jasmine Crockett." The band played. The audience applauded politely. Jasmine emerged from backstage with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, waving perfunctorily at the crowd before crossing to shake Bill's hand. The handshake was brief, almost aggressive. She dropped into the guest chair with challenging energy, her posture defensive before a single question had been asked. "Jasmine, thanks for being here," Bill said warmly, settling back into his chair behind the desk, his note cards arranged before him. "Thanks for having me, Bill," she replied, but her tone carried an edge that immediately felt wrong. like a blade poorly concealed beneath velvet. The audience shifted slightly. Something was off. Anyone who watched the show regularly could feel it. The usual rhythm was already broken. The energy skewed wrong. So let's start with something straightforward, Bill continued, glancing at his notes, determined to establish a positive tone. You've been very vocal about several issues lately. What would you say drives your passion for public service? It was the softest possible opening. A question designed to let the guests talk about themselves, share their story, connect with the audience. Any media-trained political figure would know to take this gift and run with it, using the platform to articulate their message and build their profile. But Jasmine's face changed. Her perfunctory smile vanished. Her eyes narrowed with instant hostility. The transformation was so sudden, so complete that several audience members visibly reacted. "You know what drives me, Bill?" she said, leaning forward aggressively. "What drives me is people like you sitting in your comfortable studios asking questions like you actually care about the answers when we both know this is just performance for you." The studio went silent. Not the silence of anticipation, but the shocked silence that comes when something goes catastrophically wrong. Bill's eyebrows rose, genuine surprise crossing his face. In all his years of broadcasting, he'd never had a guest open with outright hostility to a completely benign question. "I'm sorry," he said carefully, his voice maintaining professional calm. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that. I brought you on the show because I'm genuinely interested in your perspective." "Oh, you understand exactly what I mean," Jasmine shot back, her voice rising with immediate aggression. "You. Media types are all the same. You bring people like me on your shows so you can look diverse and inclusive, so you can check your little boxes, but you don't actually want to hear what we have to say. You just want us to smile and be grateful for the platform." The audience exchanged uncomfortable glances. Camera operators kept filming, but even they seemed uncertain about what they were capturing. This wasn't debate. This was immediate, unprovoked attack. Bill set down his pen, his movements deliberate and controlled. "Jasmine, I brought you on the show because I thought you had interesting perspectives to share. I've been doing this for decades, and I've given platforms to thousands of voices. That's literally the point of having guests, interesting perspectives." Jasmine laughed harshly. "That's rich coming from someone who's built his entire career on mocking people who look like me, who come from where I come from. But sure, Bill, tell me more about how much you care about diverse voices." The tension in the studio was becoming suffocating. Members of the audience shifted in their seats. Some whispered to companions, others stared in disbelief. This wasn't the show they'd come to see. "I think there might be some fundamental misunderstanding here," Bill said, his voice still steady but with an edge of steel beginning to show. "I've never mocked anyone based on their appearance or background. I critique ideas and policies, not people's identities. That's kind of my whole thing. Respect." Jasmine's voice escalated dramatically. "You call this respect? Bringing me on here to be your token guest so you can point to me later and say, 'See, I'm not biased. I had her on my show.' That's not respect, Bill. That's exploitation." Bill took a visible breath, his patience already being tested in ways he clearly hadn't anticipated. "Jasmine, I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot here. Why don't we start over? Tell me about the issues that matter most to you, the policies you're fighting for, the changes you want to see." But Jasmine wasn't interested in pivoting, in salvaging the interview, in actually using the platform she'd been given. She was just getting started. "The issues that matter most to me?" Her voice dripped with theatrical sarcasm. "How about the issue of hosts like you pretending to care about real problems while you sit in your ivory tower making jokes about everything? How about the issue of wealthy entertainers cosplaying as political commentators while real people suffer?" "I do care about real problems," Bill replied. And for the first time, a slight edge crept into his voice. "That's why I do this show. That's why I bring on guests from all different backgrounds and political perspectives, to discuss important topics, to have actual conversations about things that matter." "Important topics?" Jasmine suddenly stood up from her chair, the movement so abrupt and aggressive that it caught everyone off guard. "You think this is important? You think sitting here in your fancy studio talking about politics like it's some kind of intellectual game is important? People are suffering out there, Bill, while you make your little jokes and count your money." The audience went completely silent. Bill remained seated, but his posture had changed. His relaxed confidence was replaced by controlled alertness. He was clearly trying to maintain command of a situation rapidly spiraling beyond normal parameters. Jasmine, please sit down, he said with deliberate calm. Let's have this conversation like adults. If you have criticisms of how I approach things, I'm happy to hear them. But we need to discuss this rationally like adults. Jasmine's voice reached a fever pitch. You want to talk like adults? Then let's talk about how you and people like you have been part of the problem for years. Let's talk about how your brand of fake progressive commentary is worse than honest conservatism. Because at least they're honest about where they stand. Bill finally stood as well, but his movements were measured and controlled. The opposite of Jasmine's barely contained chaos. I'm going to ask you one more time to please sit down so we can discuss this calmly, he said, his voice carrying real authority now. This is my show, and I'm trying to have a respectful conversation with you, even though you seem determined to turn it into something else. Your show. Jasmine laughed, that same bitter, hostile sound. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Your show, your rules, your way of doing things. Well, maybe I don't want to play by your rules anymore, Bill. Maybe I'm done pretending that this whole setup isn't just designed to make people like you look good, while people like me are supposed to be grateful for the crumbs of attention you throw our way. The situation was spiraling completely out of control. Bill glanced toward his producers off camera, his expression clearly asking for guidance on how to handle what was becoming an impossible situation. The producers frantically gestured back, equally uncertain. This had never happened before. Guests got heated, sure. Debates became arguments, absolutely. But this immediate, aggressive, personal hostility from the opening question was unprecedented. Jasmine, I understand you may have strong feelings about certain topics, Bill said, making one more attempt to salvage something from this disaster. But we need to be able to discuss things in a civil manner. That's the basic requirement for any kind of productive dialogue. Civil manner? Jasmine's eyes flashed with rage. You want to talk about civility while you sit there in your position of privilege, judging everyone else, while you make millions mocking people who are actually trying to make change. Don't lecture me about civility, Bill. I'm not judging anyone, Bill replied, his patience clearly eroding with each hostile exchange. I'm trying to have a discussion. That's literally all I've been trying to do since you sat down. You're the one who came out swinging at shadows. A discussion? Jasmine moved closer to Bill's desk, her body language aggressive and confrontational. This isn't a discussion. This is you trying to control the narrative like you always do. This is you trying to make me look crazy while you play the reasonable moderate. I know how this works, Bill. Security personnel were now visible at the edges of the camera frame, alerted by the escalating situation, ready to intervene if the guest's behavior continued to deteriorate. Bill noticed them and held up a subtle hand, signaling them to wait, still hoping to resolve this without forcibly removing a guest from his set. Jasmine, I need you to calm down, he said firmly. We can disagree about things. I welcome disagreement. That's what makes for interesting conversation. But we need to do it respectfully, and you need to stay in your designated area. But respectful disagreement was clearly never what Jasmine had come here for. She was about to cross a line that would end not just this interview, but any credibility she'd built in her nascent political career. You know what your problem is, Bill? Jasmine said, her voice now filled with pure venom. You think you're so much better than everyone else because you have this little platform, this little show that lets you feel important. But you're nothing. You're nothing but a washed-up comedian who got lucky decades ago and has been coasting on it ever since. The words hit the studio like a physical blow. The audience gasped collectively. Even hardened crew members looked shocked. Whatever line separated heated debate from personal attack had just been obliterated. Bill's face went pale, but remarkably, he maintained his composure. That was uncalled for, he said quietly, with more restraint than most people could have mustered. I've been nothing but respectful to you since you walked onto this stage. I've given you a platform and tried to have a meaningful conversation despite your immediate hostility. Respectful? Jasmine threw her head back and laughed loudly, the sound harsh and grating. You call this respect? You call bringing me on here to be your dancing monkey respectful? To be the token person of color you can point to and say, look how open-minded I am. I brought you on to discuss important issues, Bill replied, his voice getting firmer now, the steel beneath his usual wit finally showing through. Issues that you said you cared about in all your pre-interview communications. But instead of having that conversation, instead of using this platform to actually share your message with millions of people, you've chosen to attack me personally from the moment you sat down. Attack you? Jasmine's eyes widened in theatrical mock surprise. Oh, per Bill. Did I hurt your little feelings? Are you going to cry about it? Is the big tough political commentator going to cry because someone finally told him the truth about what a fraud he is? The audience was completely stunned. Some people had their mouths literally hanging open. Others looked around nervously, as if seeking permission to leave. This had gone so far beyond uncomfortable that there were no social scripts for how to respond. Jasmine, I'm going to give you one last chance to sit down and have a civilized discussion, Bill said, his patience finally reaching its absolute limit. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Not because of your opinions, you're entitled to those, but because of your behavior. Ask me to leave? Jasmine's laugh became almost hysterical. You're going to kick me off your show because I'm telling the truth? Because I'm not playing along with your fake intellectual routine? Go ahead, Bill. Show everyone what happens when someone doesn't worship at the altar of Bill Maher. Bill looked at her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. A kind of sad resignation, the look of someone who'd tried everything possible and recognized futility when it stared him in the face. Security, he said quietly, the single word carrying immense weight. Please escort Miss Crockett from the set. There it is, Jasmine shouted triumphantly, as if this had been her goal all along. There's the real Bill Maher. The moment someone challenges you, the moment someone refuses to bow down, you have them removed. This is who you really are, everyone. This is what fake progressivism looks like. 2 security guards approached carefully, their movements professional and non-threatening. Ma'am, we need you to come with us, the first guard said politely but firmly. Don't you dare touch me. Jasmine snapped, backing away but continuing her tirade. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The moment someone speaks truth to power, they get silenced. The moment someone won't play the game, they get removed. You're being removed because you're being disruptive and hostile, Bill said, maintaining his position behind the desk. Not because you're speaking truth to power. You haven't said anything of substance since you got here. You've just been attacking me personally. Disruptive. Jasmine's voice reached new heights. The truth is disruptive to people like you, isn't it? You can't handle someone who won't validate your self-image as the wise, reasonable moderate. The security guards moved closer, their patience professional, but their intent clear. Ma'am, please come with us voluntarily, the first guard repeated. Jasmine looked around wildly, as if suddenly realizing where she was and what was happening. But instead of calming down or attempting to salvage anything, she escalated even further. You think you can silence me? She shouted, her voice cracking with emotion or rage or both. You think you can just make me disappear because I'm telling the truth about what kind of person you really are? About what a fraud this whole show is. Nobody is trying to silence you, Bill said, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting before him. You're welcome to have your opinions. You can share them anywhere you want. But you can't come onto my show, refuse to engage in actual discussion, attack me personally, and then expect to stay. That's not how anything works. I'll show you the same respect you've shown to every guest who's ever disagreed with you. Jasmine shouted back, backing away from the guards but moving dangerously close to the audience section. Which is none. You pretend to be open-minded, but you're just another gatekeeper protecting your position. The audience was now visibly uncomfortable, many standing to move away from Jasmine's erratic movements. Some were filming on phones, capturing every moment of this historic meltdown. Others looked at the exits, clearly wanting to leave but uncertain if they were allowed. Ma'am, we really need you to come with us now, the second security guard said, taking another careful step forward. Don't come near me, Jasmine warned, pointing dramatically at both guards. I know my rights. You can't just drag me out of here for speaking my mind. This is censorship. This is exactly what I came here to expose. We can remove you for disrupting the show and creating a safety concern, the first guard replied calmly, his training evident in his patience. Please don't. Make this harder than it needs to be. Jasmine looked around the studio wildly, searching for allies, for validation, for anything. Finding none, she turned back to Bill with pure fury in her eyes. This is what you do, isn't it? She said, her voice from all the shouting. When someone calls you out on your garbage, you have them removed. When someone won't play your little game, you silence them. You're no different from any other powerful person protecting their privilege. I'm not silencing anyone, Bill said, moving slightly from behind his desk, maintaining safe distance but projecting calm authority. You're silencing yourself with this behavior. You had a platform here tonight to share your message with millions of people. Instead, you chose to attack me personally, refuse to engage in substantive discussion, and create chaos. Those are your choices, Jasmine, not mine. Attack you. Jasmine's voice cracked. I'm telling the truth about you. I'm exposing this whole fake setup you've created. This whole thing is a lie. She gestured wildly at the studio around her. The lights, the cameras, the audience, the fake conversations, it's all designed to make you look good and make your guests look foolish. That's simply not true, Bill said firmly, his voice carrying real conviction. I've had thousands of guests on this show over the years. Most of them have been treated with respect and have had productive, meaningful conversations. You're the only one I've ever had to ask security to remove. Think about that. Productive for who? Jasmine demanded. Productive for your ratings. Productive for your ego. Because they certainly haven't been productive for the people whose lives you make jokes about. The security guards exchanged glances and moved decisively closer. The situation had gone on long enough. Ma'am, this is your final warning, the first guard said. Please come with us voluntarily, or we will have to physically escort you from the premises. Remove me then, Jasmine said defiantly, spreading her arms dramatically. Show everyone what happens when someone dares to tell Bill Maher the truth about himself. Show everyone what fake progressivism looks like when it's challenged. Bill stepped forward slightly, making one last attempt to end this with some shred of dignity. Jasmine, you still have time to salvage something from this, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle given the circumstances. You can stop, take a breath, and we can finish this interview professionally. You can make your points in a way that people will actually listen to instead of just being shocked by your behavior. Salvage this? Jasmine laughed bitterly. The only thing that needs salvaging is your reputation after people see how you treat guests who don't worship you. I treat guests the way they treat me in the show, Bill replied with finality. You came on here hostile from the very first question. I've been trying to have a civil conversation this entire time while you've done nothing but launch personal attacks. Everyone watching can see that there's nothing civil about this setup. Jasmine's voice reached a crescendo. There's nothing civil about bringing people on here, just so you can control the narrative. You're a fraud, Bill Maher. She pointed at him accusingly. You're a fake liberal who pretends to care about progress while you tear down anyone who actually tries to make real change. The audience gasped audibly. Even for a show known for controversial moments, this was unprecedented territory. A guest having a complete public breakdown, burning every possible bridge in the most spectacular way imaginable. That's enough, Bill said, his voice carrying real authority for the first time all evening. Security, please escort Miss Crockett out of the building. This interview is over. You can't handle the truth, can you? Jasmine shouted as the guards finally approached close enough to gently take her arms. You can't handle someone who won't play your little game. This is censorship. This is silencing dissent. Ma'am, we need you to come with us right now, the first guard said, his grip firm but professional, guiding her toward the exit. Get your hands off me, Jasmine yelled, trying to pull away but finding herself firmly held. I'll leave, but I'm not going quietly. Everyone needs to see this. Everyone needs to see what happens when you tell the truth on Bill Maher's show. She turned toward the camera one last time as she was being escorted away, speaking directly to whatever viewers were still watching this train wreck. Remember this moment. Remember what happens when someone tries to tell the truth. They get silenced. They get removed. They get treated like criminals for speaking their mind. You're being removed for being disruptive and hostile, Bill called after her, his voice tired but clear. Not for your opinions. There's a difference. My opinions are too real for your fake show, Jasmine shouted back as the guards moved her steadily toward the exit. Too real for your fake progressivism. Too real for your comfortable audience who wants to feel good about themselves without actually changing anything. As she was led away, she continued shouting, her voice gradually fading as she moved further from the set. This is what fake progressive looks like. This is how they silence anyone who actually challenges their power. Remember this. Remember what you saw tonight. The doors finally closed behind her, cutting off her voice mid-rant. The studio fell into stunned silence. Bill stood there for a moment, looking drained, looking like someone who'd just survived something he couldn't quite process. Well, he finally said, turning to address the shell-shocked audience and the cameras. That was unprecedented. In all my years doing this show, I have never had a guest behave that way. I've had heated debates, absolutely. I've had people disagree with me strongly, even angrily, but I've never had someone come on with the apparent goal of simply creating chaos and attacking me personally from the first second. He took a breath, composing himself, finding his professional center again. Let me be clear about what just happened, because I'm sure clips of this are already going viral and context will be important. I invited Jasmine Crockett on the show because I thought she had interesting perspectives to share. I asked her the most basic softball opening question possible. What drives her passion for public service? A question designed to let her talk about herself, her goals, her vision. Bill shook his head slowly. Instead, she immediately became hostile, accused me of tokenism, refused to engage in any actual discussion of issues, and escalated into personal attacks. I tried multiple times to redirect, to salvage the interview, to give her opportunity to actually use this platform, but she wasn't interested in that. I'm not sure what she was interested in, honestly. The audience, recovering from their shock, began to applaud. Not mockingly, but in support of their host, in appreciation of his patience and professionalism in an impossible situation. Look, people are allowed to disagree with me, Bill continued. People are allowed to criticize my show, my approach, my politics. I welcome that. That's what makes for good television and important conversations. But you have to actually engage. You have to bring something beyond just personal attacks and accusations. Otherwise, it's not debate. It's just chaos. He glanced at the camera directly. To those watching at home, I apologize that you had to witness that. You tuned in for interesting conversation and instead got, well, whatever that was. We'll take a quick break, collect ourselves, and come back with our other scheduled guests. Hopefully, they'll actually want to have a conversation. As the show cut to commercial, the studio erupted in discussion. Audience members talked animatedly to each other, processing what they'd just witnessed. Crew members exchanged looks of disbelief. Producers rushed to adjust the remaining show format to figure out how to proceed after such a bizarre opening segment. Within minutes, clips from the interview flooded social media. But the response wasn't what Jasmine might have hoped for. Instead of seeing her as a brave truth-teller standing up to power, viewers overwhelmingly saw exactly what had actually happened. A guest having a public meltdown, attacking a host who'd done nothing to provoke it, and destroying her own credibility in the most spectacular way possible. I just watched Jasmine Crockett have a complete breakdown on Bill Maher's show, tweeted one political commentator. Bill asked her the most basic question possible, and she immediately went on the attack. Whatever point she thought she was making was lost in the chaos she created. That wasn't speaking truth to power, wrote another observer. That was someone unable to control themselves in a professional setting. Bill showed remarkable patience while being personally attacked for no apparent reason. Even people who regularly criticized Bill, Maher found themselves defending him in this instance. The consensus was overwhelming. Jasmine had embarrassed herself, had wasted a valuable platform, and had demonstrated the exact opposite of how to effectively advocate for anything. Political colleagues who'd previously supported her began distancing themselves. Organizations that had featured her suddenly removed her from their websites. Within days, it became clear that she'd committed career suicide on live television. But perhaps the most damning response came from people who shared Jasmine's political views, but were horrified by her behavior. She set back everything we're trying to accomplish, wrote one activist. Instead of making a cogent case for our positions, she just confirmed every stereotype about us being unreasonable and unable to engage in civil discourse. 2 weeks later, Bill addressed the incident briefly in his opening monologue. People have asked me about what happened with Jasmine Crockett, he said. Look, I feel bad for her. I think she came on the show with some kind of chip on her shoulder, some preconceived notion of who I was and what the experience would be like, and she couldn't get past it. I hope she gets whatever help she needs. It was a gracious response, far more gracious than Jasmine had been, and it only made the contrast more stark, between someone who knew how to navigate difficult situations with professionalism and someone who spectacularly did not. The incident became a case study in how not to handle media appearances, how not to advance your cause, how not to respond when given a platform. It was referenced in communications courses, in political training sessions, in countless articles about effective advocacy. What started as what should have been a straightforward interview became a cautionary tale about the importance of emotional control, professional behavior, and the ability to engage in civil discourse even when you disagree with someone. Jasmine Crockett had walked onto that set with an opportunity to share her message with millions. She walked off having destroyed her own credibility in less than 30 minutes. Was Bill Maher right to have her removed? Could this have been handled differently? Was there some way to salvage something productive from the chaos? The questions lingered in think pieces and social media discussions. But to anyone who actually watched the interview, who saw the immediate hostility, the refusal to engage, the personal attacks without provocation, the answer was obvious. Bill Maher had shown remarkable patience and professionalism in the face of behavior that would have tested anyone. Jasmine Crockett had shown exactly what happens when emotion overwhelms reason. When personal grievances replace substantive argument, when the goal becomes creating chaos rather than making change. And in the end, the lesson was clear. You can have the best political positions in the world, but if you can't communicate them effectively, if you can't engage in civil discourse, if you can't control yourself when given a platform, then you'll accomplish nothing, except making yourself a cautionary tale about how not to advocate for anything you claim to care about.